All right, guys, we got everything ready to go. So first thing that we're going to do is you can either long press on this, and that would be for OpenTX, or on EdgeTX, you can just click here and say select model. We're actually going to take this 700 competition, and we're going to say duplicate. And so we have it duplicated right here. We're going to select model.
Engine off. Flight mode normal. Switch warning.
And that is a pre-configured model. We're going to come in and we're going to rename it. Oxy 5 meg. So now we're going to come down to bind. Right? And we can see that we're on DSM, AETR, 22 millisecond. We're going to get set up to bind, and we're going to set the radio down. So now, as we can see here, we have the Spirit device ready to go, right? The cyclic servos are plugged in at 1 through 4. The auxiliary number 2 is for our BEC that we're going to power the unit with, and our LiPo battery that will be powering the BEC. We have both of our satellites plugged in, satellite port number 1 and number 2. This is a Spirit Pro device, so it doesn't necessarily tell you what's positive and what's negative here. So on the Spirit Pros, you can see the brown wire here is negative. So negative is the outside wire. And again, we don't want to plug anything that has power into the sys or into the elevator pitch aileron. So we have our 3 cyclic servos right here. We have our tail servo right here. Let's go ahead and power this unit on, and then we'll jump into the Spirit software and see where we're sitting. So we plugged in the Spirit USB, and we ran it into the sys port. Right, and then we powered the BEC on. So it says, we've noticed on your computer that this is the first time that this software has seen this particular unit. Do you wish to use the wizard? We can go ahead and say yes. So it says, thank you for buying our device. You're welcome. Now it's going to ask us, what do we use? We use Spectrum on this particular setup. DSM. Next. It's going to show you what I've already showed you, where things are, where the negative is, where the positive is, and what you use to bind. So we're using DSMX satellites, so the bind will actually be the elevator pitch aileron port. Okay, so we'll hit next. We want to go ahead and tell this thing that it's going to be Oxy 5. Right, so it'll pre-set up a whole bunch of stuff. And then it's actually CCPM 120. We're going to be setting up the device like that. The wiring is going to face the rear of the vehicle. And then we'll hit next. Now it wants to know what our servos are. So our cyclics are only set at 150 Hz. We can go ahead and pop those up to 333. Our tail is at 560. I'm actually going to bring that down to 333. And I'm actually going to bring it up to 1520 for pulse, because I don't know exactly what these servo specs are. So let's set them very basic, and then we can amp it up if we want to later. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Now this is the part where you bind, and it says the receiver was type was changed because apparently this guy was using something else. So after I click OK, it says that it wants us to power the unit off and follow the instructions on screen. So we click OK. Settings were saved to the unit. Okay. And now we want to power it off. We've unplugged the BEC, so everything is off. So we have our bind plug in. Now we're going to go ahead and plug power back in. And as soon as we do plug power back in, we can actually see that the DSMX satellites are sitting there flashing. Right? They're doing their thing. So now we can actually come to the radio and we can click on bind. So we're going to go ahead and click bind. And as soon as we do, we will see that they start flashing, and then it does this one, and then it does that one. And boom, now they're bound. The whole binding process is complete. We go ahead and according to the directions, we power the unit down, and then we pull the bind plug, and then we power the unit back up. So I powered the unit off, unplugged the bind plug, power the unit back on, and once the unit is fully initialized, and you can hear the servos go dun dun dun, now we can click connect. And now it says it's connected, and we can hit next. And now we can check and see if our radio is actually working, which it is. Awesome. Can hit next. Now we don't know channel 1, 2, 3, 4 whether we need reversing or we need to reverse the collective direction. We don't know that yet, so we just have to hit next. Now sub trimming, we're actually going to leave this alone and hit next. Our geometry we cannot mess with yet. Collective pitch range and cyclic tuning we cannot, or rudder endpoints, we cannot mess with those yet. And so we hit next, and then we're at finish. Okay, so it's going to save automatically to the unit, and it's going to reboot you into the software. So we want to come back into servos. Okay, and what we actually want to do here, something that I wanted to correct from my last video, something that I just found out, guys, I was moving this and the rudder wasn't moving. So this servo is 760 US and up to 560 Hertz. I'm just going to do 333, but if I do not have it selected on 760, the servo does not work. And if I select 960, it only works one way. And if I select 1520, it doesn't work at all. When I select 760, it completely works. All right, guys, so while we're in the sub trim here, we want to set everything to 0. And we actually want to unplug all of these servos while this is check marked and while we have them all at neutral. Because if we recheck mark this, they're not going to stay at neutral. And if you bump the flight controller, it's going to make them change. So we want them to stay dead center. And so down here as well, we also want to trace the wires, and we want to take note of what servo is number 1, number 2, and number 3. And obviously we know rudder is number 4. So we want to take note of that. So now we can go ahead and unplug them one at a time here. Now they are all dead center, and we know which servo is which. And then we can come over to backup, and we can say save to unit. If you do save to profile, that will actually just save a file onto your computer. Something else that we can quickly look at is just some of these settings here. So stabilization, we will set to normal, and we'll put that value to 2. And then rudder common gain, I like to do 1.25. Cyclic gain is fine. I like to put my rudder up to 10 for speed. Cyclic at 8 for speed is fine. And then I'm just going to set the collective pitch mid, and I'm going to turn the cyclic ring up a little bit. But generally you would do that once you get the servos mounted. Our rudder endpoints, we can go ahead and set those directly mid. Right, and then uncheck. And then we'll say save the unit one more time. And now we're ready to get all this stuff mounted up, guys. So that is the first initial setup, and then we get everything mounted up, and then we can go from there.